Hey, this is FixReef, and today we have this EB832 in for repair. Now, I normally do not record EB832 repairs much because, but by now they're all the same or similar. But this one I figured I'm going to give it a shot because there is something unusual about this one. On the surface, it looks, decent enough, just a regular EB832. Now, however, if we flip it over, there are issues. Look, we have a couple of spots that are faded with clearly smoke damage on each side, and right over here on the right we actually have a hole in the body. There is a hole, all goes all the way through. So there was some major fire going on inside, and it caused smoke damage, and it caused some of this melting damage. Also, if we look over on this side, even the fan managed to get some of this damage as well on this side. So essentially, every hole that this EB832 had on the back got smoke coming out of it at some point. So one thing to note before I open this up is that this is the newer model of 832 because it has this UL logo on it, which means that it's supposed to have a newer minimal 12-volt power supply, so we don't have to hopefully worry about that, but who knows what's inside of this. So let's open this up and see what we see. Alright. I honestly have not received an EB832 with this much damage before. I've had some damage where, a component would fail, but I have not seen something like this. I'm gonna go ahead and look up the ticket for this repair in a minute and see what the customer states that happened to this. If it has been water damaged or it just out of the blue failed on them. Okay, the customer stated that they believe there is a 24-volt power supply damage inside that caused all of this. They didn't specify anything regarding anything else. So for now, I have to just assume that it was plugged in and at some point it just blew up. Let's open it up. I'm kind of afraid to even open this to see what's inside. Oh my God. Oh my God. Look at this. Well, let me actually keep this open up for now. So if you like the outside, you're gonna love the inside. It smells like, burned electronics. All black over on this end, black over here, right around the 24 power supply, and black over on the fan. In fact, it looks like the fan, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it out. In a minute. It looks like the fan has melted partially as well. Okay, we think we have our work cut out for us. Let's get it completely disassembled. This, of course, brings the memories of the former Neptune marketing guy, Florence, who had his house burned down or partially burned down when an Apex component failed on him. I don't remember what exactly failed, if it was an EB832 or something else, but he essentially came back home from a business trip to find out that his tank is gone and there is a lot of smoke damage around the house. Things like this may cause issues. Alright. But hey, look, at least we have the new minimal power supply over here. I suppose that's a plus. The underneath of this is also fun. Alright, let's zoom in. You should be able to see this and appreciate this a little better. So I didn't have to do any soldering, or unsoldering I should say. The fan wire is gone, disconnected. The input 120 volt wires into the 24 power supply are completely disordered. Power supply, however, comes off pretty easily, and there is this massive damage. So let's take a look at this damage. I see a piece of zip tie. I see all kinds of burned plastic here, and for that matter, burned PCB board from the power supply, and we have a fan that's completely glued in and then probably melted into the base. So now you can kind of hopefully see the power supply. Let me bring it closer. See if that thing can focus today. Yeah, this fan is gone. It still spins though, barely. But this fan is gone now. Okay, let's put, oh well, also looks like there is this damage here on the board somewhere, but I cannot believe the amount of damage on this unit. I just cannot believe the amount of damage. Well, let's put this plastic away and let's look at the rest of the unit. Okay, so in general, a typical power supply like this, a 24 volt power supply or a 12 volt power supply, is going to have an input voltage and an output voltage. On one end it's the input voltage, in this particular case it's here on the right side, and the output voltage of 24 volts coming out on the other side. So there is very little to no damage over on the low or the 24 volt power supply side, but there is a lot of damage over on the high voltage, which kind of makes sense because the voltage is high and so it's supposed to cause that much damage if something bad happens. However, there is of course this over here. This is some type of this is supposed to be a circuit breaker over here that's supposed to cut the power to everything in case of a massive problem like this. Obviously not in time. Let's flip over the other side to see the back of this. This power supply is, I think, gone at this point. I don't see how I'm going to be able to repair the power supply itself. It's not going to be safe even if I attempt to repair it. High side, main board's partially gone. There is really nothing here to save. All of this is going to cause trouble. I am not messing with high side, AC side of power supplies. If something like this happens, it needs to be replaced, no questions. The question is, can we actually save the rest of this? Let's focus over on the main board here. So the main board is, let me zoom in a little bit. So the main board has this damage over here. It's obviously low side, but it's a significant damage. And the damage is coming from what appears to be a, well, I actually don't know. Looks like what's going on here is that there is a power sensing circuit, current sensing circuit, for two outlets, this and this. And there are also control circuit for, there's also control circuit for the two relays that switch these outlets on and off. So there is damage somewhere in here that that is different from things that I usually see. Usually, what I see is a short somewhere. One of the outlets causes a shunt resistor to blow up, which causes this resistor array to blow up, and that's usually the end of it. Here, it looks like there is damage. I'll have to get perhaps under the microscope to look a little bit closer. The damage is on the traces going to control the relays. So there is that. Plus there is damage over here. I wouldn't be surprised if this controller is completely gone, entirely gone. And of course over on this side we have this massive damage, but that's mostly surface and it's mostly smoke related. So that part I'm not too worried about. I wouldn't be surprised if I can just quickly try to wipe it off and it would work. Yeah, it comes off easily. Comes off and creates a lot of mess. Yeah, this is just smoke, nothing particularly terrible over on this side. Just needs good cleaning. Before we go onto that circuit, I would like to look at what's going on here. Now the area around all of this relays is also kind of badly damaged by the smoke, but cleanable, so not a big deal. What I need to make sure is that the relays themselves didn't get damaged and the outlets didn't get damaged. They can now be compromised. Not bad at all. Alright, I have no clue whether or not this is going to actually work. Again, I highly suspect that one of the relays is gone as well. But I won't know this for sure until we power this unit up and see what it does. For now, what I do know is that there is a problem over on this controller over here. And I suspect that the problem is deeper than just traces. So now the first thing I want to do is I want to probably disconnect this whole power supply so that it's not in the way. We already know that it's gone and it will be completely replaced. So one of the tricks that I always tell in my videos on removing any kind of connectors, no matter what they are. I mean, you can get low melt solder and that's going to help you. But the low melt solder is on an expensive side a little bit. What I like to do is just put a lot of regular solder on here, just a lot of the regular solder that creates this big blob. And then now this big blob carries the heat a lot better than regular soldering joint. So when I just use my iron like this, it provides a lot of heat to everything around those two pins. And all I have to do then is just pull it out like this. See? Nice and easy. No need to use any expensive low melt. Nice and clean. Okay, well now we can get rid of the power supply. I honestly would like to see what could have caused the damage, because remember that the power supply, in addition to everything else, by itself has a fuse. So if there is a short past the fuse circuit, the fuse is supposed to blow up. Like for example, if there is a short on a bridge or there is a short on one of these large capacitors, it's supposed to completely cut off the circuit. Here it looks like the short happened prior to the fuse. So what I'm going to do eventually is I'm going to get a new power supply and we're going to compare what this has and what the new power supply has and figure out what is actually intact here, and as far as the circuit goes, as far as the traces go, and what's failed. I suspect that the short occurred before the fuse, and that's why it never stopped burning until everything here burned out. So let's now focus on this smaller circuit that controls the outlets. One of the things that I would like to do first is make sure that we don't have a short on the main controller. So grab any power resistor, and you can hear the beep. That means that the controller is gone. Guaranteed at this point the controller is gone. Then we can test this. Looks like the diodes that control the that go around the relay is good. And let's look at these resistors. These resistors are likely all blown up. Well, you can't see the values on my multimeter, unfortunately, but they are all bad. They are all, every single one of them is bad. So what this means is that we have at least a problem on one of these two controllers that we'll have to fix. Well, we've got some repairing to do. So let's focus on repairing this circuit around here, and then worry about the 24-volt power supply. So the first thing I would like to do is I would like to remove the controller, because based on the measurements around the capacitors, power capacitors for it, there is a short. I just want to make sure that if I remove the controller, the short is going to be gone. Okay, so the controller is gone, and now we can test for the short again. Looks like the short is still there. So that means that we may have a problem on the power circuit. Well, but on the flip side, maybe the controller is live. So let's alright, so now that we've determined that the short is still there when the controller is removed, which is kind of surprising, but not really, let's look at other things. So the controller is powered by this voltage regulator over here. So it takes, I think, I believe it takes something like 12 volts and turns them into 3.3. So let's take a look. There is a short everywhere on that guy. That's not good either. And now I'm gonna also test the output of the 12 volt power supply. And there is a short on the mean well as well. It doesn't mean that the mean well is bad, we'll find out, but at least there is definitely a short. I'm pretty sure that the power to these units come from the 12 volt power supply. So there are not that many things that are going to go wrong here. So let's just go ahead and start removing these components one by one, because one of them is going to lead us to the problem. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'll remove the voltage regulator. Right, so with the voltage regulator removed, if the short was in the regulator, now we should have clear pins, and that's not the case. Everything is still very much shorted. Wow. Now I'm starting to suspect mean well, because mean well provides power to the voltage regulator. The voltage regulator, however, beeps on all possible pins, so both on the input and the output. So before we mess with the voltage, mean well, let's test the voltage regulator. Was there a short on it originally? Doesn't look like it. Looks like the voltage regulator is perfectly fine. This will be the last component I'm going to remove before doing more thorough testing, because these are the easy low-hanging fruit. To test. But then I suspect that this is not going to solve all of our problems. Okay, mean well is out, but check it out. Just because it was good on the surface, it doesn't mean that it's good now. Look at this. That cracks throughout the entire unit. Crack, crack. I bet you that if I were to open it up, it would have issues inside. So let's test the output of it, and it's still shorted. So the 12 volt mean well is also shorted and gone. Now let's test. Now that the short on the input from the mean well is good, is gone, is not there anymore. However, a short on the voltage regulator is still present. So at this point, who knows where the problem is? I don't. So we are going to, instead of removing more components and kind of guessing, playing the guessing game, at this point I had enough of playing guessing games. I'm just going to go ahead and do a different type of test. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provide power to where the voltage regulator will have created 3.3 volts, and I'm going to give it a little bit of limited current, just good enough to start heating up elements over on the circuit that are bad, that are shorted. So we'll need a couple of jumper wires. The pin over all the way in the corner is going to be our ground, and the pin in the middle is going to be the 3.3 volt. presumably. So that's good enough. Now let's hook up the power supply, the lab power supply anyway. And I'm going to use this little handy device. You probably won't see much in it, but that's the thermal camera that's supposed to tell me which component is heating up. Let's find out. A complete short on the power supply. I don't know how much you can see, but it looks like the other controller is heating up quite a bit. We're gonna try to add a little bit of current. And it's getting brighter and brighter and brighter. So this controller is gone. Nothing else seemed to be affected. So we'll remove this controller too. Now with the controller removed, hopefully that was our last short. And indeed, no more, well, this was me touching, but no more beeps on us. Very, very, very interesting. So we have both controllers for all 8 outlets completely gone. We have a couple of other items here, like this resistor bank gone. I'm not sure about these resistors here, but nothing else, thankfully, for now at least, has been damaged. Next, what I would really like to do is attach a lab 24 volt power supply over to where the 24 volts were supposed to come in and see what we get there. I hope that that's all going to work. Before I even plug anything in, let's make sure that there is no short. Doesn't look like it's shorted. That's good. Now, let's give it 24 volts with a little bit of current. Just like the power supply that was in here originally would do. Let's plug it in. Okay, no issues on the power supply, and it looks like it's consuming at least some power. So that's encouraging. Let's measure some voltage over on the controller and other circuits. So 24 volts. It's coming in and then it's supposed to produce 3.3 volts, which it does. 3.3 volts goes in here, which it does. And also produces enough to power Aquabus 12 volt, which we already know it does because everything else is working. Without the 12 volt on Aquabus, the 3.3 volts wouldn't have worked. But we're going to test it anyway. 13.5. So yes, 12 volts being produced, 3.3 volts being produced. So it looks like this low side of this EB8 is actually quite okay. So lucky we. So all we have to do is replace these 2 controllers. Small components like this array of resistors, the 12 volt power supply, and the 24 volt power supply. And then this unit may work again. So let's get to it. Okay, so we've determined that the main controller is working. Most of the main low side circuits are working. Now we just need to figure out how to fix this. So to fix this, I already have this is a non-working power supply. I already have a working power supply ready to be replaced, the 12 volt one. And I also need a 24 volt power supply, which I need to find. Here's going to be my replacement 24 volt power supply, and for that matter, I have a working fan to replace this. So let's get to it. The fan is going to be the last thing we will have to worry about. For now, we just need to remove all of the things that are not needed here before we can proceed. Start with the bigger stuff, like for instance, I don't think I'm going to be reusing these wires. They already had enough, so we're going to have to remove them entirely. So let's add some regular solder, and they're already falling out. Okay, so that's removed, and now we just need to clean up the holes. Nice and easy. Everything is going to be nice and clean for the replacement. It is still a mystery as to what happened exactly to this unit. That was some major fire that caused all this damage, and I'm not exactly sure I fully understand or can fully appreciate the reasoning as to why. It could possibly be that the the unit was exposed to water. That's definitely possible and plausible. It's also possible that something failed inside. What is wrong, however, and what I think is troublesome, is that the fuse that was installed in the 24-volt power supply did not go, it didn't blow. I actually don't remember if I tested the fuse. I'll need to go test the fuse on the bad power supply at some point in this repair, just to see if the fuse is still good or not. Because if the fuse is still good, it obviously didn't do its job. And the only explanation, logical explanation for this, is that something happened prior to the fuse circuit, or the fuse is so bad or faulty that it didn't go. Again, when I do these repairs, in this particular case, I'm replacing the entire power supply, but those cases when I need to repair a 24-volt power supply, which does happen often, not as often probably as the 12-volt power supply repair, but often enough, I actually have to replace the fuse, and I use a US sourced fuse for it of the proper parameters, so that I know that at least there is a fighting chance that if something happens, it's going to do what it needs to do. Okay, so we've cleaned up most of the larger mounting holes. Now we need to replace both of these controllers. I'm also going to replace the array, resistor arrays on each side, because I don't think I trust them. If the controllers are bad, it means that resistors must have fried as well. So all of those resistors are going to go, and the new controllers will be installed in place, and then it's going to be the moment of truth. So for this, I'm going to go under the microscope, because I want to make sure that I do things right for the controllers here. And resistors are kind of small; it's easier to do under the microscope. So let's get under that and get it done. All right. So first things first, let's clean up this original solder. I usually like to make sure that it's nice and clean, and just put the new solder in place so that I know the temperature of the soldering is going to be lower, and it's going to be just an easier install that way. So always when you're doing controllers like this, always make sure to run the soldering iron along the pins and not across them, because you don't want accidentally to damage the pads here. Not a big deal if it happens, can always be restored, but why create extra work? Okay. I have to charge a little bit extra for when controllers are being replaced like this, because it's just, in part because of the cost of the parts, in part because there's just a lot more work that's involved in getting the controllers like this replaced. It's not as simple as just grabbing a couple of resistors and putting them in place. Not to mention that most of these controllers have to be programmed. Okay, so now that it's clean, a little bit of cleanup. Okay, now that it's in place and ready, now it just needs a little bit of cleanup, because we've already used up most of the most of that old flux is already used up, and it's not really useful. We'll need to use new one. Absolutely critical to use good flux on this. or for that matter, some flux. One thing that you certainly don't want to do is you don't use any flux on this. It's just not going to work. So my field of view is a little bit larger than the camera field of view for this. So you won't be able to see the entire controller, but pieces of it. And we're going to use a hot air station to install them all. These suction tools are quite handy. They just lift the controller and put it in place. And very simple tools. You can buy it as part of a reflow workstation or whatever, and they will cost a lot more. Or you can just buy cheap ones that you operate with your hand. They work just as well. Unless of course, you're doing massive amount of reflow work. And here it goes. Okay, so that controller's done. We've got one more. This one I'm going to just accelerate and get through real quick. There isn't a whole lot to it. Same exact process. This landed just perfectly. No additional work. Alright, so both controllers are in place. Next, we're going to remove all of this resistor arrays. We don't need them at all because they are all bad. There are 4 of them on this entire board. Each is responsible for measuring current off of 2 outlets, so there are 8 outlets total. Very good. So you can kind of see that my replacement resistor arrays have more digits on them. That's because they are more precise. They're the same value as the originals, but they're more precise. And because they're more precise, they're going to give you more accurate current reading. Alright, so the only thing that I want to do is I want to go one more time through, just make sure that everything has enough solder at each joint. And that's going to be solid. Alright, hopefully we're done with the microscope. Let's get back to the overhead camera and finish this up. Okay, now all that's left is installing power supplies. So I'm going to start with the big one. Get that in and not worry about it. Let's flip it over. Okay, after a little bit of struggle, the 24-volt power supply is in, and the 12 volt should just go in much easier. And that's it. Okay, so one thing that we still need to do is fix those traces. 2 of them burned out. That's never good. So we'll need to restore them. Could remove the... Oh, this one's good. Perfect. Because they both are supposed to be connected to the same pin, I'm just going to bend the wire and attach it to both of the traces. Alright, so now we have a board that's mostly done as far as installing new components and repairing traces goes. Technically speaking, it's perfectly fine to plug it in right now, except that it's not going to work because both of these controllers are not programmed. So we'll need to program those next and then hope that the rest is going to work. Okay, so now finally everything is programmed and it's time to test. The first test is going to be plug it in by itself into the power outlet just to see if there are any issues with anything. Plugged in, and I don't hear any kind of noises. Let's see if we get any power anywhere. The 24-volt power supply produces power, and the 12-volt power supply produces power. But I don't see any other signs of life. Let's see where else we get power. Do we get power on here? It's 3.3. Do we get power on here? I don't get any power off of the voltage regulator. So I guess my hope for it being alive was a little bit over-exaggerated. So we'll need to replace the voltage regulator. That looks good. Let's plug it in again. And I now hear the click. And now I think it's working. Okay, so the unit is assembled. Now it's the moment of truth. We're going to connect it to the power, we're going to connect it to the head unit, log into Apex, and find out if it works. Okay, so here comes nothing. Okay, good news, the light is on. The main light is on, and I've heard some clicking. Let's plug in Aquabus, and clicking again. The LEDs are on. Now let's get into Apex and see what's there. Okay, so now we're going to turn off all of the outlets and watch them turn off, and the LEDs shut off, and the relays click. So that's good. But the biggest question, and I'm going to turn them on now, the biggest question is, will we have proper current reading on this? So to test for this, I'm going to plug in my test light. It's supposed to consume 12 to 15 watts on an outlet, so let's watch. Okay, well, 10 watt, I guess. So that's good. On outlet 6, and that's correct. Let's randomly grab this. And this is going to be outlet 4. And that works as well. And outlet 8. And that works too. And maybe one more, perhaps outlet 5. And that works also. Very, very cool. So now we have a complete repair. Well, we've done a lot this time, a whole lot. So let's go over some of this. So let's see here. We received a badly burned EB832. We have both of the power supplies completely burned out, and I'm not going to even bother fixing any of this. They will have to be replaced, and they were. So we've replaced the power supplies. We've replaced a bunch of components on the main board, including both controllers that manage all of these outlets. We've replaced resistor arrays, capacitors, and some other things. Repaired traces as well. So there was a whole lot of work that went into fixing this particular EB832. The biggest question is, what could have possibly caused this? So I'll probably, in my leisure time, I'll take a closer look at this and maybe wash it a little bit, see what condition it's in, because if this has corrosion, signs of corrosion, and it was dunked in water, that's one thing. If this was just randomly combustible unit, that's another problem. Even if this was a corrosion-related issue, like exposure to water, the fuse over here is supposed to protect it from completely burning out like this. And if it didn't, it means that either the fuse is faulty, or well, I guess perhaps the short happened before the fuse. Another problem of course, is why is it that this didn't shut off either, but perhaps the load wasn't as bad. Notice how I'm going to keep the original case for this. There is a bit of a hole and a little bit of this, but there's not much I can do about this. I guess this is an extra ventilation hole at this point. But that was the repair. This was the wildest EB832 damage I have seen with regards to a burned component. I've seen some shorted power supplies before, but nothing at the rate where we have to completely replace the power supply because the other one literally burned into ashes. This was a very, very interesting repair. Challenging as well. But I hope you've learned something interesting from this. This was Fix Reef. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.